Sometimes new information causes a crisis of direction. What do you do when you realize you've been going the wrong way? In this week's talk, we'll show you how embracing the classics can set your life on a healthier path.
Have you ever come to the sudden, shocking realization that you've been doing something the wrong way for a long time? Whoops! Like when you suddenly realize that all of those micro scratches on your really nice new nonstick skillet are because the spatula that you thought was nonstick friendly is not. Shoot, that stinks. Or when you go to you run over a screw, because you always run over screws and nails. I don't know how many get on the road, but they're everywhere. You run over one, you take it to Walmart, and they say, "I'm sorry, sir, we can't replace these tires because there's too much wear on them." And you say, "These things are like a year and a half old. How is that possible?" And he says, "Well, there's uneven wear. How often do you rotate the tires?" And you go, whoops. Or when you realize that password that you use to sign up for the online dog food, update service that you haven't even used for 3 years somehow got hacked, and now all of your accounts online are suspect because you used the same password for everything. "No, I don't. I put a 1, 2, 3 at the end." I know. It's a bad moment. Nobody likes to be wrong. I hate it when I realize I'm wrong, but it's especially bad when you've got well-established pathways for the wrong way. And when you thought you were doing it the right way, and you thought the way that you were going was okay, it's a difficult spot. It forces a crisis of action when you realize that what you thought was good and what you thought was working is not working, and you need to change something. Today, I want to talk to you about a guy who found himself in that kind of crisis and see how he responded to it, because I think there's a lot we can learn from the way he responded to discovering some old vintage documents that still happen to be true. Let me tell you about this guy. His name was Josiah, and he lived from about 640 BC until around 610, 609 BC. He was the king of the small break-off part of the nation of Israel. They had a civil war of sorts. They split. He was the part of the small piece, Judah. He was the king of Judah, and he became the king as a child, 8 years old. He's in charge of the nation, and he got a bad deal of cards to work with. The Egyptian empire was growing in strength from the south. The Babylonian empire was advancing and growing in strength from sort of the northeast. They were stuck in the middle. And he was trying to be a good king. He was trying to be a good man. As he grew, he realized, he looked back through history, and he said, all right, Dad was serving the pagan gods in the nation. Things went badly for him. Granddad was serving the pagan gods in the nation. Things went bad. When were things good for Judah? And he realized from the history, things were good when Judah was serving God. So he says, all right, we're going to make some changes. We're going to start tearing down all of the old altars. We're going to stop worshiping these other gods. We're just going to worship the God who came to Moses, the God who revealed himself when he brought our ancestors out of Egypt, the God who is known as I Am, or the Lord, or Yahweh. So he goes through this whole deal, and for 10 years, he's making major changes to the society. We're all going to turn and serve God. And near the end of that process, he goes to renovate the temple, which had fallen into disrepair. He hires some craftsmen. They're going through the temple. They're picking up pillars and setting them back up, and they're taking old, broken out panels and replacing them. And as the construction guys are going through the rubble, they find, buried under some junk, a scroll. And they blow the dust off the scroll. wow, how long has this been here? Ugh. And okay, most of those guys didn't know how to read, so they took it to a priest who was there, who was literate, and the priest undoes the scroll, starts reading and goes, oh no, the king needs to see this right away. So they rush it to Josiah the king, and they read it to him, and he goes, oh no. His reaction is found in 2 Chronicles 34. We're going to read little pieces of it together. It's a great story. Read the whole thing this week. But it'll be in the Bible app or up here on the screen. Verse 19 of chapter 34. When the king heard what was written in the law, he tore his clothes in despair. Right? So think about, Superman, except the worst possible version of this. In their culture, when you were in anguish and despair, the way that you would express your not outrage and anger, but like, oh no, what are we going to do? Is you would literally tear your clothes. So the king is having a bad day. Verse 21, he said, the Lord's great anger has been poured out on us because our ancestors have not obeyed the word of the Lord. And we have not been doing everything this scroll says that we must do. He has an unfortunate interaction where he learns an old truth. He finds something vintage and he says, uh-oh, we have not been doing this the right way. Something has got to change. If you've been around church for any period of time, you've probably had a similar interaction with this book. Because when you open up the Bible, there's stuff in here that, let's be honest, is kind of old school. It's not really the way that society operates anymore. And some of these things are a little bit out of phase with normal in societies across the world, but especially in America. This book says that sexuality is supposed to be between two people who are married, and that try before you buy is not an option for sex. This book says that legally binding contracts shouldn't be necessary because a handshake and a face-to-face promise should be as binding as any contract. This book says that when God created humanity, he made it in two gender varieties on purpose so that he could, in humanity, express the full nature of his character in us. This book says that if you want to have good things in life, you should cheer for the Dallas Cowboys. Some people don't add that in, okay? Obviously, that's outdated, right? Sometime in the 1990s, cheering for the Cowboys stopped being fun. I do it because I'm a loyal fan. There's a lot of stuff in this book. If you really read it, there are a lot of things in here that are old school ideas that are out of phase with the way that people are living today. But if I believe that God wrote the book, I'm just like Josiah. When I discover that, I'm faced with a crisis because even when I'm trying to do good, I sometimes find things and this says, that's not the right way, Chris. And it adds stress to my life. There are 3 different options that you can take whenever you learn an old truth that doesn't match what you're doing. Whenever you realize that the scratches on the nonstick skillet are not because your teenage son made eggs, they're because you put the wrong cookware in the drawer. It's not his fault. Maybe a little bit his fault. Mostly mine. Okay. What do you do when you learn that? You have 3 options. Option number 1 is the option that most people who are not in church today take. Most people who don't believe in God or don't support the Bible, and that is to just sort of stick your head in the sand and pretend like you didn't hear it. I'm just going to ignore this piece of the passage that says the way you're living is not right. I'm going to put my head in the sand, la, 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 and plug my ears. No, I'm not listening, and just go on with life. And sort of accept whatever is broken in life is just the way life is. It's just the way it's going to be. That's just living in America. Being broke is not because I'm buying stuff I don't need to impress people I don't like with money that I don't have. It's not because God said don't go deep into debt or it'll be painful. It's because America and capitalism and the mean 1% are forcing it on me. I just ignore it. That's option 1. Option 2 is popular among church people. Option 2 is I'm going to find wherever the arrow of my life lands, and I'm going to get a bucket of red paint, and I'm going to paint a bullseye right around that. I'm going to take this book, and I'm going to bend it, I'm going to bend it and contort it and twist it until this thing says it fits what I'm already doing, because that resolves the tension. You see, God does support my idea of how I handle things between me and my wife, because if you really reinterpret this passage, and what it really means is women just need to be quiet and do whatever the man says, and okay, because that's never been translated that way in society before. That's another option. Or there's option 3. Option 3 is the one that Josiah took. Let me show you what he said. Verse 29 of that same chapter. The king summoned all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem, and he pledged to obey the Lord by keeping all his commandments, laws, and decrees with all his heart and soul. Keep that up right now. These 2 words, I didn't make them bold, but it's really important. He said he summoned that's 3 words, all the elders. And he pledged to keep all the commandments with all of his heart. He said, I'm going 100% in. Whatever's in the scroll, I believe, is the way we should do stuff. And don't miss this. A guy who was trying really hard to be a good guy. A guy who was not ignoring the things. He was doing everything he knew that the Lord wanted him to do. But when he learned something else, he said, we got to do it, whatever's in the book. Because he made that decision because of something I want to instill in you this whole series, this idea, you want to write this down in your notes, that the truth is still true no matter how old it is. If something was ever objectively true, it will always remain objectively true. The truth is still true no matter how old it is. Now, we're accustomed to things being updated and facts being updated based on new information. A long time ago, everybody thought the world was flat. Few people still haven't gotten the memo. It's a sphere, right? We've learned that. Not too long ago, everybody thought that time was constant and space and gravity and all of those were variable. Well, now we understand that time is not constant. It kind of depends on a lot of different factors. We, like I said earlier, we used to think that cheering for the Dallas Cowboys was fun. That was 1995. It's been a while. Okay, we're used to updating what we believe based on new facts. But if a truth was written by someone who holds all the facts, if it was written by someone who designed the system, then there's never really a time when truth expires. There's never really a time when objective truth is no longer true. Think about this. Not a trick question, okay? Teenagers, not a trick question. I promise, I'm not trying to make you look bad. You're just helping me here, all right? Somebody who's currently in school, what is 4 times 4? What's 4 times 4? 16. Okay. That gives me a little bit of hope, right? You all said it at the same time. Okay, 16. Here's what's cool. If you're going to Pekin High School or any of our schools, 4 times 4 is 16. Now, here's the amazing thing. In 1991, when I was learning multiplication tables, do you know what 4 times 4 was? 16. That's pretty cool. Math has been around for a long time. The oldest written record of multiplication we dug up from a place in the Middle East. It dates to about 2500 BC. So 4,500 years ago. You know what's amazing? Do you know what 4 times 4 was 4,000 years ago? 16. Do you know what 4 times 4 will be in hundreds of years when Captain Picard asks the ship computer on the Starship Enterprise, "Computer, what is 4 times 4? It'll still be 16 because objective truth is still true no matter how old it is. Josiah found something and don't miss this. He didn't say, well, that's a really old scroll. It's weird to think a guy who was a long time ago found something ancient. This thing probably hadn't been read in 100 years. And he digs this out. And instead of saying, well, that was a different time. That was written when this was all one kingdom. Now we're just Judah. That was written when Moses was here. God does different. No. He said, if that was ever true and the God of the universe spoke it, it's still true. It's still binding. I need to listen to it. The truth is still true no matter how old it is. And it would be great if I ended the service there and said, all right, so do it. Okay. The thing is, you all know that you're supposed to do the stuff in this book. Okay, it's not new information to any of us. We know that God wrote it. We know that we're responsible to do it. So why is this even a talk? Why don't we just always start rotating the tires I don't even know how often it's supposed to be. Every once a quarter, whatever it is. Why don't we just rotate the tires, Chris? Here's why. Because, write this down, old truth is inconvenient. When you learn something that's been buried in there the whole time and you've been doing it a different way, it's inconvenient. Now, let me tell you, the original version of these notes, this fill in the blank said, sometimes old truth is inconvenient. And I came back and I edited it and I took out the sometimes because I thought about it and I thought, I cannot think of a single time when it's convenient to learn that the way I was doing something is wrong. It's never fun. Change is always hard. There's this weird idea that old people don't like change and young people are okay with it. That is absolutely not true. I'm telling you right now, change where the share button is on one app and see if young people like change. Nobody likes change. It makes you relearn everything. Nobody wants to open up their password app on their phone and there's this little warning triangle on all 162 of them. And you say, well, you got to have a unique password for every website. It's like, dude, I don't have enough brain space for that. Nobody wants to do it. Change is hard. Let me show you a couple of the things that are going to stand in the way because, make no mistake, the stuff written in this book is still true. It will always be true, and God will hold you accountable for it, whether you think it's outdated or not. So you probably better do it. There are some things that make it difficult. One of those is this. This is probably the hardest one. Put this up on the screen. Embracing old truth, write this down, means admitting you were wrong. Ugh. I hate admitting that I was wrong. Some of you guys have a friend or family member that you're like, I don't know if once in their life they have ever done this. Okay? Even when they're obviously wrong, they're not going to admit it. It's hard. The first step of the process, it takes humility to say, I thought I was doing this the right way. I thought I was doing what made sense. God, I was trying to be a good person. But if you read and it's like, oh, wait, I'm supposed to respond to the situation like that, and I've been doing it like this, I don't want to change, but you've got to be able to submit and say, Lord, my bad. I missed it. I mean, imagine how difficult it is for a king to have a royal decree, pull all the leaders in and say, guys, my bad. I told you to do this stuff. Do you know who makes the laws in a monarchy? The king. There's no Congress to blame it on. There's no, it's that other party. It's those mean old Republicans. It's those nasty Democrats. No, there's nobody else to blame. The king makes the laws, and he's the one who has to say, guys, I was wrong. Could you imagine any sitting president holding a press conference and saying, America, you need to understand that all of the rules we put in, I thought it was great. Actually, I was an idiot. I was wrong. We're changing it tomorrow, right? Not likely. Not likely. It's hard. Now, if this is especially tough for you, as I was thinking about this, the Lord, I think, put this idea on my mind, because I know for some of you, this is the biggest hurdle we'll talk about today. Because you want to honor God, but there's so much, you don't want to be wrong. You got to understand, I was wrong does not mean I was an idiot. Josiah was a good man. He was doing his best to lead the nation right. He was so much better than his guys that came before him. I was wrong doesn't mean I was an idiot. I was wrong means I was underinformed. I've learned new information, and now I'm going to change what I'm doing to fit the new information. But you've got to do that. It's hard to change, but it requires that. Here's what else. Write this down. Embracing old truth requires costly renovations to your normals. Normals with an S. When Natasha and I first got married, we read this fantastic book that presented this idea. Normal is kind of variable, and it depends on the family you grew up in. Some of you guys, your Thanksgiving celebration is either the way you did it or the way your husband did it or some kind of weird combination of the two. And sometimes that produces a little tension in your life at holiday season because normal is really well entrenched. And if you read the Bible, if you come to church and the guy on the stage tells you that God said to do something a certain way and you're like, well, that's not what I'm doing, and you feel stress, part of the stress is saying, well, now I'm going to have to unlearn a lot of stuff that I learned. It is really hard to unlearn things that you've done for a long time. When you grew up part of your time in Kentucky, and you think the thing sticking out on top of the house to pick up signal is an antenna, and she says it's antenna. And you say, isn't that what I said? And she says, no, you said antenna, like you're still in Kentucky. Okay? It's hard to retrain the tongue to say the word differently. It's just hard. It's, okay, when you come to church and you've barely balanced your budget, and the guy says, look, God said the first 10% of everything you make is His, and it's supposed to be given for the spiritual health of the community. You're like, okay, well, that's not going to be an easy transition. When you're living together and you enjoy sex all the time like married people, and the book says that's only for people who put a ring on it, and you're like, well, I'm still saving up for that ring. I'm not inclined to stop hanging out together in that way. Okay, it's inconvenient. It was inconvenient for Josiah. Let me tell you, some of the requirements in this book might have cost him literal money. He's got his back against the wall trying to hold off two big empires that are trying to squish his little kingdom in the middle. But he said, if it's important enough for God to have written it, I'm still on the hook for it. It's hard, but you got to do it. Here's one other thing. Put this up on the screens. Write this down in your notes. One other hurdle you got to overcome. Embracing old truth invites criticism and pushback. You're going to have people in your life who not only don't share your values, but actively don't share them, who think that your values are stupid, who think that you're being an idiot, people who love you and want the best for you and don't understand that God also wants the best for you. Because they're going to say, wait a minute, you're buying Christmas presents for kids at the Boys and Girls Club? You need to buy more stuff for your own family. How many are you bringing for your nieces and nephews? That church is just trying to take all your money. You're going to have people, when you say, look, man, I want to honor God with my sexuality, and if I'm attracted this way, but God said that's not the way that sex is supposed to happen, I'm going to choose not to have sex. What? What's wrong with you? They've brainwashed you. People will not understand. People in your family will not understand. Your classmates will not understand. Sometimes pulling out a vintage old truth and blowing the dust off and saying, I'm going to handle my business this way, you might lose clients. You might not get that sale if you have to be perfectly honest and have integrity about your prices coming in and not pad the cost. Okay, it might cost something. Let me tell you, Josiah, think about this. Do you know why he became the king at 8 years old? Do you know why that happened? Because his dad got assassinated. Because he made some unpopular decisions. And the people who didn't like it were like, well, let's just kill the dude. Okay? He grew up knowing if the people in my kingdom don't like what I say, they might just stab me. And yet he said, I'm so convinced that this is what God wants. I will do it, even if it's unpopular. It's hard. And you have all of these things against you. But let me tell you, as Mark comes back up, let me tell you what you have for you. The good news is at Christmas time, we celebrate this idea that Jesus didn't just leave us to figure it out on our own. He came down to personally walk us through the process. Last thing to write down is this: Christ came to guide you to the truth. Christ came to this earth to metaphorically take humanity by the hand and say, here, let me explain what I meant when I wrote this. Let me explain the heart behind the rules. Let me show you how doing it my way is actually going to go better for you. And then let me help put my finger down and tip the scales toward you choosing a better path. It's a beautiful thing about Christmas. Jesus didn't just come, don't miss this, Jesus didn't just come to talk about love. He came to talk about truth. Listen to what John said in John 18:37. He quotes Jesus, and Jesus said, I was born and entered the world, watch this, so that I could witness to the truth. See, so many times we take what Jesus said and society wants to say, yeah, that's good. You know what? It's like a buffet. I want this. I want the sweet potato casserole and I want the green beans, but I never really like the mashed potatoes because they don't have enough salt. I'm just going to leave that off. It's not a Thanksgiving buffet. Jesus said, I'm here to testify to what is true. And if it was ever objectively true, it will always remain true. He said in John 16:13 that even after Jesus physically leaves the planet, he said, when the Spirit of truth comes, that's the Holy Spirit, who is in every believer, everyone who has accepted God as their Savior. He said, when the Spirit comes, he will guide you into all truth. It's not just about love. It's not just about trying to be a good person. It's about recognizing what is objectively true in God's word and bending your life around to fit what this says. And I know that's hard. I know. But you've got to do it. 2 Chronicles 34:27 records how things turned out for Josiah. So he heard the old truth. He says, I'm going to pull out all the stops. We're going to change this society until it fits. And here's God's response, verse 27. God says, you were sorry and you humbled yourself before God when you heard his words. So I will not send the promised disaster until after you've died and been buried in peace. He was the captain of a sinking ship. It wasn't his fault. Other people before him had messed things up. He was in charge of something and the world was decaying around him. And even as the world was going down the toilet all around him, God said, you will have peace in the middle of catastrophe because you listened to me and you prioritize doing things my way. There's a great benefit to recognizing truth and realigning your life to fit it. And it does take work, and it is hard. And man, I wish that it were not so hard sometimes. Listen, I'm the pastor, and sometimes I read stuff, I'm personal devotional time, I'll read something, I'm like, oh, you don't really mean that like literally, right? Yeah, I do. Like, oh man, I'm really bad at that. Yikes. But the designer of life didn't write those things down to make them hurdles. I know we say this all the time, but I feel like I'm trying to push back against a culture that misunderstands. Everything he wrote in this book is for your health and for your benefit. It's playing the long game. Because you could take all of those slashes in your nonstick skillet and say, you know what? I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to keep cooking. I'm just going to keep on cooking. And you can keep cooking. But how many of you are excited about the idea of nonstick chemical stuff getting cooked into your eggs? Not me. I don't really enjoy the idea of cancer. Okay? I don't want that. You could keep going, or you could take all of your passwords, the name of your kids, 123, the name of your kids, 123, exclamation mark, the name of your kids, 123, exclamation mark, hashtag. You could keep doing that for all of your accounts. And you could say, you know what? The idea is wrong. What I really need is to have something that I can remember. I don't want to change. And that goes fine until somebody hacks your bank account and you're not buying presents for your kids because somebody else bought presents for themselves with your credit card. Or you could listen to the truth and say, if this was ever true to begin with, it's still true today. If this was ever binding to begin with, it's still binding today. If this was ever the pathway to health, it's still the pathway to health today. And I'm going to embrace it. And it's going to take God's help to do that. It's not natural. But lean into his help and you'll be healthier. Don't let your need to be right overpower your need to be whole. Don't let the cost of change end up making you settle for brokenness in your life. Don't let the words from the people that you like drown out the wisdom from the God who loves you and died for you. When you run into those things, when you run into the old truth, make the hard decision. God, I will take this and I will let you start crafting that in my life. And he will help you every step of the way. That's how you resolve that tension. Hey there, just wanted to take a minute to say thanks for watching. If a friend sent you this link, it's because they believe what we talked about today is going to make a positive impact in your life. And if it did, there's probably somebody that you care about who could benefit from it. So take a minute to share this video with somebody. Post it to your timeline or send them a direct link. And if you're able, take a minute to give using the link at the bottom of the description on this video. One last thing. Maybe you feel a tug at your soul and you're ready to take the next step in your spiritual life and form a relationship with God. We've got folks here who would love to talk with you about it. So just text prayer to the number on your screen and we'll follow up with you. It's also in the description on this video in case that helps. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.